Welcome. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'm Jim Sturgis, the Executive Director of Pioneer Institute, and I'd like to start by thanking all of you for coming in the middle of the summer. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, Democrats for Education Reform and Harvard's program on education policy and governance. I'd also like to thank the representatives that are here this morning for being here and showing interest in the community. Your participation in the process for Lawrence is absolutely key. I'd also like to thank Jeff Riley for being here, making time. I know he is a slightly busy guy, acting as the Superintendent-receiver of the Lawrence Public Schools. Beth Anderson of Phoenix Charter Academy, which is now the first charter school to run an in-district school. Boston University professor Charlie Glenn. Tom Gusnell of the American Federation of Teachers, the Massachusetts chapter. And it's really good to see, Tom, where are you? Good to see you back on your feet. Thanks very much for being here. And Jose Afonso of Sabas Educational Systems. I'd also like to thank our chairman, Bill Tyler, Alan Morse, Steve Aiken, all board members from Pioneer for being here. I appreciate your attendance this morning as well. And of course, Kingman Webster, who's been involved in Lawrence for the longest time. I appreciate your being here this morning. This is an annual event that we hold to mark the birthday, or really the anniversary of the birth of the famed economist Milton Friedman, who's probably the greatest popularizer of the idea of parental choice, especially the idea of giving inner city kids the choices that folks who live in satellite communities around Boston or in the suburbs all have. To celebrate his birthday, we like to sponsor conversations around school choice and urban district reform. Those are very much in the spirit of what Milton Friedman used to do. If you recall, Free to Choose was a multi-part series where one of the documentaries, commentaries that he did was about school choice. And there he sat with a former Commissioner of Education here in Massachusetts, Commissioner Anrig, as well as the legendary union leader, Al Shanker, and debated the merits and some of the issues around school choice. And frankly, if you go back and you'll see, if you go to the Boston.com, there's a blog up today on that. The terms of the debate really haven't changed very much, but the urgency has only gotten greater. This morning is about that urgency. It's about what I think is a very important conversation for Massachusetts. We often talk about, and probably talk about too often, how wonderfully we're all doing in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is the #1 performing state in the country, and we're in the top six countries in math and science according to the Trends in Math and Science study, et cetera, et cetera. But we know very well, notwithstanding progress among all subgroups, that in places like Lawrence and Springfield and Holyoke, you can name them, we have a long way to go. And that's what this morning is about. Our progress, I think, can be directed to some great policy ideas that were implemented back in 1993. Many of those were actually inspired by something very important, which was a sense of urgency around the city of Chelsea. And that's when Boston University went in with the support of the legislature to take over the Chelsea schools. And some of the things that came out of that were embedded ultimately in the 1993 Education Reform Act. But the sense of doing something big, let's break the mold, let's do something big, really grew out of Chelsea. And I think that's kind of what we're facing in Lawrence. And I'm really glad to have the panel that we had this morning to talk about it. Because if you go back and you think about New Orleans before Katrina, well, you know what? The kids in Lawrence are doing about as well as the kids in New Orleans before Katrina. When the hurricane came in and swept in, everybody said, well, golly, there's a lot of poverty. In fact, those kids aren't doing well in schools. We have to recreate the entire system. And they did. And today, 80% of the schools in New Orleans are charter schools. Washington, D.C. has been going more slowly, but 42% of their kids are in charter schools. That's the path they have chosen. So what is the path we choose for Lawrence? The state has decided to approach this with a real sense of urgency, to bring in a superintendent from outside, a receiver to take over the schools, to change the district schools, to change out teachers, to change out leaders, but also to bring in new players, folks who have run charter schools, to run district schools, to take them over and change them around. So in many ways, this is our Katrina moment. Lawrence is our Katrina moment. And we hope at Pioneer that from Lawrence we'll see a new kind of thinking about what we can do for our districts, especially places like Springfield or Holyoke, with that greater sense of urgency, and there will be new things learned in Lawrence along the way that we can take away. So let me tell you a little bit about the event this morning. What we're going to do is we're going to start with Jeff Riley, have him come up and talk about what his goals, what his plans are. Then we're going to have come up to the table here Beth Anderson, who I mentioned before, Jose Afonso, who's from Savas, Tom Gusnell, who is, again, the head of the American Federation for Teachers, and Charlie Glenn, who's a professor who's probably forgotten more than I've ever learned about education. Have them talk about what's happening in Lawrence, have them talk about the contours of education reform in our inner cities. And then at the very end, we're going to have, we're very pleased to have Charlie Glenn with his pen out to sign for those of you who'd like to purchase his latest book. Let me go on and introduce Jeff Riley. Jeff Riley is the superintendent-and-receiver of the Lawrence Public School District. Prior to taking on this role, Riley served as Chief Innovation Officer at the Boston Public Schools, overseeing creative approaches to accelerate student achievement and strengthen outside partnerships with schools. Before that, he served as academic superintendent in Boston, overseeing all of the middle and K-8 schools in the district. Throughout his career, he has worked as a principal, counselor, and teacher at various urban school systems around the country. Jeff, come up to the podium. Thanks very much for being here.
Good morning. I noticed that most of the adults in the room chose to forego the front row seats, much like children on a regular basis. I had a gentleman who came to help me once who made everyone move up to the front row. I thought that was a good idea. I'm not going to do that to you today. About 6 years ago, at a Midwestern Catholic institution that I won't name, there were a group of about 400 kids taking a midterm exam, a final exam on Irish literature. Now, what was supposed to be the wonders of Joyce, Yeats, and others was butchered by a professor who didn't know the material and didn't like the kids. Nonetheless, the 400 kids filed in to take the final, gathered their blue books. You all know what a blue book is, right? Gathered their blue books and went up into this amphitheater-style classroom where the kids actually walked up the stairs. So the professor was on the ground floor looking up at these 400 students. His remarks to them were simple. You have 1 hour to take this test. That's it, 1 hour. The kids, slightly afraid, yet ready to be done with this class, began furiously writing in their blue books. At about the 45-minute mark, the professor started yelling, "You only have 15 minutes left. There's 15 minutes left of this examination." That caused about half the class to close their blue books and come down and start stacking them up, one after another on top of the professor's desk and walking out the door to their winter vacation. At the 55-minute mark, the professor said, 5 minutes, that's it, 5 minutes. Again. Hello, you gonna help me? Oh. It's good, it helps me with the 20 minutes. It's all in the end. Oh no, we want the blue book up. She'll be back. At the 55-minute mark, most of the kids were done. They couldn't take it anymore. They folded up their blue books, they walked down to the professor's desk and started stacking it. The stack of blue books at this point was about this high. At the 59-minute mark, there were 3 souls left in the class. And the professor said, there's 1 minute left in this exam. That's it. 2 kids closed their blue book, came down, stacked it up, walked out for their winter break. But there was 1 kid way at the top who kept writing in his blue book. At the 60-minute mark, the professor said, time's up, get down here right now. But the kid ignored him and kept casually writing in his blue book. The professor couldn't believe it. He said, that's it. I told you, that's it. Get down here right now. But the kid continued to ignore him. Now, 4 to 7 minutes may not seem like a long time, but when you're the only one in a room with a professor who's jumping up and down, nearly apoplectic with rage, could be an eternity. Nonetheless, the kid just kept casually writing in his blue book. At this point, the professor was nearly frothing from the mouth and was going to go up and grab the blue book. And the kid quietly closed it, gently walked down the stairs. The professor started getting in the kid's face. "What are you doing? You heard my instructions. You want me to fail you?" Almost spitting in the kid's face. And the kid said very quietly, "Professor, you don't know my name, do you?" The professor said, "What?" He said, "Professor, you don't know my name, do you?" And the professor said, "No." And the kid said, "Good." And he took his blue book, he shoved it in the middle of the pile, and he ran out the door. I tell that story to new teachers often to remind them of the importance of personal relationships. But I think there's a connection to what we're trying to do on a bigger scale. Turning around a school district, I don't think has really ever been done. We've seen schools turn around, but we've not really seen in this country, maybe an argument can be made for New Orleans, Katrina, that it's been done. The approaches that have been done have followed a similar path. A broad blanket, decentralized approach, top-down approach. That is not what our plan is about. It's about something very different. My name is Jeff Riley. I am the superintendent/receiver of the Lawrence Public Schools. We do need to, at some point, decide either the superintendent or receiver, because I get called different things on different times. They've asked me to come today to speak to you about the Lawrence plan, which I'm happy to do. I know there's controversy in public education. There's different sides who have different beliefs. But basically what I believe in is good schools. I send my children to a Boston public school, commendation school, regular public school. I was a principal of a regular public school that turned around, that has made some national headlines, not so much for me, but because of the quality of the teachers and the work they got done. I've also seen some great charter schools and some great Catholic schools. But at the end of the day, I don't care about those things. All I want is good schools for kids. And that is what the plan is based on. The plan has ambitious goals. After the first year, we want to double the number of schools achieving a student growth percentile over 50 in math and ELA. Right now, as one example, in ELA, we have 4 schools that are hitting this mark. Now, this is a very broad, rough way to kind of gauge first-year results. SGP is a little bit more complicated than that. But it is fair to say, I think, that if you're not above 50 in SGP, you're actually increasing the achievement gap for our students. So we want to double the number of schools that are going to do that. Within 3 years, we want to be one of the top performing gateway cities. Our peers across Massachusetts, who we like to compete against, frankly. Right now, of the 22 or 24, depending how you code them, gateway cities, we are near or at the bottom. We want to be in the top 5 in proficiency within 3 years in both math and English, and on the graduation rate. For those of you who know, about half the kids that come to Lawrence High actually wind up walking across the stage. A statistic that is simply unacceptable. And within 5 to 7 years, we want to close the achievement gap with the state. Perhaps the proudest moment I had in education was as a principal when my students in 8th grade, despite the fact that they were over 90% living in poverty, 2/3 second language learners, and more than 1/3 special education students, were beating the average suburban kid on the MCAS test in math, and were neck and neck in English language arts. There's nothing wrong with our children. The children can do it and deserve to have a great education. And then we need to exit receivership with something that's embedded and will be long-lasting and permanent, not something that's rolled back after the receivership ends. I don't usually read slides to people. I know friends don't let friends do PowerPoint, but I'm going to read this one slide to you. The Lawrence Public Schools will be a portfolio of outstanding individual neighborhood schools where students are engaged in rigorous and effective instruction in every lesson, in every classroom, in every school, every day, propelling them to perform at high levels, reach their full potential, and achieve college and career success. Those can't just be, hello. Oh, they're not even up there. Oh, hey. See, I got to read it to you. You didn't even have to read it on the screen. The battle happens in the classroom. Teachers can't be denigrated. Teachers have to be celebrated and supported. Are there times when we have to improve instruction and improve teaching? Absolutely. Are there times when maybe people need to be counseled out of the profession? Absolutely. But the reality of the situation is most people in the teaching profession are trying to do the right thing. I would argue that we need to support them and train them to get them to be better. There's 6 overarching themes on the turnaround plan. Combining the best of Lawrence and the best of the Commonwealth. Despite one magazine's assertion that Lawrence is the city of the damned, which I would argue was a low point for the city, there are good things happening in that city. And particularly, there are good things happening in the school system. When I was appointed as the receiver for the superintendent of Lawrence, I typically got the same reaction. People wincing while they were congratulating me. And as if it is so painful and so terrible that this is not something you want to do. But that's not the case. That's not what's happening. There are good people who want to do right by kids in that school system. There are good schools in that school system. But we must also admit that there's failure happening as well. And we can't shy away from that. Because there are good things happening in Lawrence, we want to build on that strength. We've appointed a headmaster who came from within the ranks to oversee the high school to bring some kind of efficiency to a huge complex. We've promoted other people from within who are doing a great job and will help us as we build this. But we also have to bring in outside partners to help. We've asked Match to come with their tutors to help us at our turnaround schools and the high schools. We've asked EMOs to come in, some of whom were charter schools, not all of whom, but some of whom, to come in and work inside the system. Not under a charter, not with a lottery, but as union employees with a little bit more space to operate to get good results for kids. And we're going to ask people to come help us, and we need that help. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is about great schools for Lawrence. I do not care, public, private, Catholic, charter. I just want good schools. We need to empower our principals and the teachers. And the plan, you'll see, is very radically different from what's been proposed. A top-down strategy is not what we're preparing for. We're making the unit of change the individual school, where teachers and the principal, the majority of whom will spend next year planning to change what the school day looks like, what the school year looks like, what the school looks like. We need to use our resources wisely. We are one of maybe 15 school districts in Massachusetts that does not meet its net school spending requirements. This is a reminder for those of you who don't stay up at night with the net school spending book, that all school districts are required to meet a certain threshold. Most school districts go above it. If you go to Brookline, they're probably at 135% of net school spending. But the minimum threshold is supposed to be 100%. The resources in Lawrence are such as that we do not meet that threshold. And so several $1 million each year do not come into the school system. And we need to be incredibly wise in how we use our money. The professor once told me that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Now, he was a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and I've been to graduate school several different times. That may have been the smartest thing that I heard in my tenure there for my master's degree. And it made sense. We've got to implement with urgency. There are kids in the schools right now that if we don't take drastic steps, aren't going to make it to graduation. I was at student registration last week, watching 2 excited kindergartners come in to register for school. And the only thing I could think of was not how cute they were, but we've got to fix this so they walk across that stage. Because if we don't, they're not going to. And this is going to be a huge problem. And at the end of the day, it's all about results. I've kind of put myself as the man in the middle, and we got to produce. And it's got to be a kind of whatever it takes culture to get it done. There's some key strategies and initiatives. I won't go over them in great detail, but I just want to highlight a few of them. I mean, we talked about the goals, the partners. The additional time is important. I think what you've seen from schools, many schools that have achieved substantial results, is they use time wisely. But I want to be clear, I've also seen schools squander time, where extra time has meant zero results. And it has to be time with a plan and time used wisely. We need to welcome our families. There's a lot of talk in Lawrence that the families don't care about their kids. That is not what I found. Parents care deeply about their children. I would argue it's been the schools who have established walls around the schools to keep the parents out, and we have to kind of change the mindset of our principals and our central office about how that works. As you know, the district has huge numbers of English language learners, and we've got to get supports. A simple thing that we started at the very beginning when I got there was to improve the facilities. Cockroaches, mice, broken ceiling tiles, broken windows, in disrepair. It sends a message to our kids if the facilities aren't up to par and ready to go. And so we spent more than $1 million already trying to upgrade the facilities and make it so kids feel that they're in an environment where they can learn. Bless you. You know, I'm not going to go over the slide in too much detail. What I would say is we're looking to build a system which is decentralized, where the central office, a command and control compliance structure, is changed to a more nimble structure that only goal is to support the schools, the principals, and the teachers. Not to give you this kind of silo-based approach where every silo, the SPED department thinks they're the most important, the ELL people think they're the most important, the food service think they're the most important, and everyone sends the principal a survey, and it's got to be done immediately, when the principal's got to do the work of being a principal. And some of the calcification that takes place inside large school systems at the central office cannot happen here. That is not what this plan is about. It's about changing the fundamental dynamic of the central office and then pushing those resources down to the schools with the belief that the teachers, with the principal, and the parents can figure out a plan to get it done, knowing that we're going to give them the support they need. We've taken more intensive interventions at the schools deemed to be the most in need. The schools labeled as the worst performing in Massachusetts, we've taken intensive interventions. But the reality is in Lawrence, we've got the South Lawrence East Elementary School, which is an incredibly high-performing school, a commendation school by the district. We have the Frost Middle School, which is another high-performing school in the district. And we want to give these people, celebrate them, and give them the autonomies and get out of their way and let them do the job. We want everyone else to plan to do better. And if they do better, we're going to give them more autonomies. I spent a lifetime as a principal, I probably shouldn't say this, evading and ignoring the central office. It was not ironic, not just to me, but to many of my principal friends when I actually then went to central office. But I went because I thought there was a different way to do things, and I feel like I've learned a lot from previous central office experiences about what works and what doesn't. And fundamentally what works is you've got to trust the people in the field, and you've got to give them the resources that they need to get the job done. A blanket approach, much like the Irish professor who we talked about at the beginning uses, where you just kind of throw the material out. If they learn it, they learn it. If they don't, they don't. In my opinion, doesn't work. You've got to let people be creative. You've got to let them, within some kind of parameter, operate in such a way that they can get good results for kids. We've done a lot about trying to get the message out to parents. There are many political entities on all sides of the equation, but the one that is often ignored are the parents. And so we've taken steps to put the word out electronically. We put it in the media. And what we've seen is the parents support the plan. When parents got just kind of the backpacking materials, went home, we were able to get some good results. 68% strongly approved of the plan. when we did even more, when we put stuff in the newspaper, when we started getting the message out even more, that number went to 83%. So parents are on board. What we need now is for everyone else to be on board and the adults in the room to be on board. People ask, what is this all about? Why is this important? I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to read you a brief story, which I read to all of my principals, and I read to the Teachers Union when I first went there in Lawrence. And it was read to me when I was a principal intern many years ago in Boston. It's called 3 Letters from Teddy. Teddy's letter came today, and now that I've read it, I will place it in my cedar chest with the other things that are important in my life. I wanted you to be the first to know. I smiled as I read the words he had written, and my heart swelled with a pride that I had no right to feel. I have not seen Teddy Stollard since he was a student in my 5th grade class 15 years ago. It was early in my career, and I'd only been teaching for 2 years. From the first day he stepped into my classroom, I disliked Teddy. Teachers, although everyone knows differently, are not supposed to have favorites in a class, but most especially are not supposed to show dislike for a child, any child. Nevertheless, every year there are 1 or 2 children that one cannot help but be attached to. Our teachers are human, and it is human nature to like bright, pretty, intelligent people, whether they are 10 years old or 25. And sometimes, not too often fortunately, there seem to be 1 or 2 students to whom the teacher just can't seem to relate. I had thought myself quite capable of handling my personal feelings along that line until Teddy walked into my life. There wasn't a child I particularly liked that year, but Teddy was most assuredly one I disliked. He was dirty, not just occasionally, but all the time. His hair hung low over his ears, and he actually had to hold it out of his eyes as he wrote his papers. He had a funny smell about him, which I could never quite identify. His physical faults were many, and his intellect left a lot to be desired. By the end of the first week, I knew he was hopelessly behind the others. Not only was he behind, he was just plain slow. I began to withdraw from him immediately. Any teacher will tell you it's more of a pleasure to teach a bright child. It's certainly more rewarding for one's ego. But any teacher worth her credentials can channel work to the bright child, keeping him challenged in learning while she puts her major effort on the slower ones. Any teacher can do this. Most teachers do it, but I didn't. Not that year. In fact, I concentrated on my best students and let the others follow along as best as they could. Ashamed as I am to admit it, I took perverse pleasure in using my red pen, and each time I came to Teddy's papers, the cross marks, and there were many, were always a little larger and a little redder than necessary. Poor work, I would write with a flourish. While I did not actually ridicule the boy, my attitude was obviously quite apparent to the class, for he quickly became the class goat, the outcast, the unlovable, and the unloved. He knew I didn't like him, but he didn't know why, nor did I know, then or now, why I felt such an intense dislike for him. All I know is that he was a little boy no one cared about, and I made no effort on his behalf. The days rolled by. We made it through the fall festival and the Thanksgiving holidays, and I continued marking happily with my red pen. As the Christmas holidays approached, I knew that Teddy would never catch up in time to be promoted to the 6th grade. He would be a repeater. To justify myself, I went to his cume folder from time to time. He had very low grades for the first 4 years, but no grade failure. How he had made it, I didn't know. I closed my mind to the personal remarks. 1st grade, Teddy shows promise by work and attitude, but has poor home situation. 2nd grade, Teddy could do better, mother terminally ill. He receives little help at home. 3rd grade, Teddy is a pleasant boy, helpful but too serious. Mother passed away at the end of the year. 4th grade, very slow but well behaved. Father shows no interest. Well, they passed him 4 times, but he would certainly repeat the 5th grade. Do him good, I said to myself. And then the last day before the holiday arrived. Our little tree on the reading table sported paper and popcorn chains. Many gifts were heaped underneath, waiting for the big moment. Teachers always get several gifts at Christmas, but mine that year seemed bigger and more elaborate than ever. There was not a student who had not brought me one. Each unwrapping brought squeals of delight, and the proud giver would receive effusive thank yous from me. His gift wasn't the last one I picked up. In fact, it was in the middle of the pile. Its wrapping was a brown paper bag, and he had colored Christmas trees and red bells all over it. It was stuck together with masking tape. For Miss Thompson, from Teddy, it read. The group was completely silent, and for the first time I felt conspicuous, embarrassed because they all stood watching me unwrap that gift. As I removed the last bit of masking tape, 2 items fell to my desk. A gaudy rhinestone bracelet with several stones missing, and a small bottle of dime store cologne, half empty. I could hear the snickers and whispers from the kids, and I wasn't sure I could look at Teddy. "Isn't this lovely?" I asked, placing the bracelet on my wrist. "Teddy, would you help me fasten it?" He smiled shyly as he fixed the clasp, and I held up my wrist for all of them to admire. There were a few hesitant oohs and ahs, but as I dabbed the cologne behind my ears, all the little girls lined up for a dab behind their ears too. I continued to open the gifts until I reached the end of them. We ate our refreshments and the bell rang. The children filed out with shouts of, "See you next year," "Merry Christmas," but Teddy waited at his desk. When they had all left, he walked towards me, clutching his gift and books to his chest. "You smell just like my mom," he said softly. "Her bracelet looks real pretty on you too. I'm glad you liked it." He left quickly. I locked the door, sat down at my desk, and wept, resolving to make up to Teddy what I had deliberately deprived him of, a teacher who cared. I stayed every afternoon with Teddy from the end of the Christmas holidays until the last day of school. Sometimes we worked together, sometimes he worked alone while I drew up lesson plans or graded papers. Slowly but surely, he caught up with the rest of the class. Gradually, there was a definite upward curve in his grades. He would not have to repeat the 5th grade. In fact, his final averages were among the highest in the class, and although I knew he would be moving out of state when school was out, I was not worried for him. Teddy had reached a level that would stand him in good stead the following year, no matter where he went. He enjoyed a measure of success, and as we're taught in our teacher training courses, success builds success. I did not hear from Teddy until 7 years later, when his first letter appeared in my mailbox. "Dear Miss Thompson, I just wanted you to be the first to know. I'll be graduating 2nd in my high school class next month. Very truly yours, Teddy Stoddard." I sent him a card of congratulations and a small package, a pen and pencil gift set. I wondered what he would do after high school graduation. 4 years later, Teddy's second letter came. "Dear Miss Thompson, I wanted you to be the first to know. I was just informed that I'll be graduating 1st in my class. The university has not been easy, but I liked it. Very truly yours, Teddy Stoddard." I sent him a good pair of sterling silver monogram cufflinks and a card, so proud of him I could burst. And now today, Teddy's 3rd letter came. "Dear Miss Thompson, I wanted you to be the first to know. As of today, I am Theodore J. Stollard, M.D. How about that? I'm going to be married in July, the 27th to be exact. I wanted to ask if you could come and sit where Mom would sit if she were here. I'll have no family there as Dad died last year. Very truly yours, Teddy Stollard." I'm not sure what kind of gift one sends to a doctor on completion of medical school and state boards. Maybe I'll just wait and take a wedding gift, but my note can't wait. "Dear Ted, congratulations. You made it and you did it yourself. In spite of those like me and not because of us, this day has come for you. God bless you. I'll be at that wedding with bells on." We live in an interesting country. There's a belief that we live in a meritocracy, the idea that anyone, if they work hard enough, can be or do anything. But that only actually works if all kids start in the same place, if all kids have access to a quality education. That is not happening in our cities in America. It is not happening in Lawrence. We have a lot of work to do, but it can be done. It's going to take everyone's help to get it done. It can't be just the teachers, as hard as they work. We need the parents. And it can't be the different entities who have their own adult issues, thoughts, beliefs. People need to set aside those beliefs and work on behalf of kids. I have 15,000 children who deserve a great education. And I don't have time for the politics. And I mean that with all due respect. I get it, I understand. But I don't have time for that. There's a man named Joyce, an Irish author, who in a book called Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man wrote, "When a man's soul is born in this country, there are nets flung at it to hold it back from flight. You talk to me of language, nationality, religion, I will try to fly by those nets. If Joyce were alive today, I think he would mend it and say, when a child's soul is born in this country, there are nets flung at it to hold it back from flight. You talk to me of charter schools, pilot schools, Catholic schools, public schools. I will try to fly by those nets. The only thing that matters is that we do a good job for our kids. And I need people to give a little bit on all sides. And that is the plan. We believe in trying to create a space where people can get together and do right by children. And hopefully with your help and support, we'll get it done. Thank you very much.